History of Tobacco, Part 1. Tobacco was long used in the early Americas. The arrival of Spain introduced tobacco to the Europeans, and it became a lucrative, heavily traded commodity to support the popular habit of smoking. Followed by the Industrial Revolution, cigarettes became hugely popular worldwide. In the mid-20th century, medical research demonstrated severe negative health effects of tobacco smoking, including lung and throat cancer, which led to a sharp decline in tobacco use. Early history, pre-Columbian America. Tobacco was first discovered by the native people of Mesoamerica and South America and later introduced to Europe and the rest of the world. Tobacco had already long been used by the Americas by the time the European settlers arrived and took the practice to Europe, where it became popular. Eastern North American tribes have historically carried tobacco in pouches as readily acceptable trade items, as well as smoking it in pipe ceremonies, whether for sacred ceremonies or for those to seal a treaty or an agreement. In addition to its use in spiritual ceremonies, tobacco is also used in ethnobotany for medical treatment of physical conditions. As a painkiller, it has been used for earache and toothache and occasionally as a poultice. Some indigenous peoples in California have used tobacco as one ingredient in smoking mixtures for treating colds, usually is mixed with the leaves of a small desert sage, salvia dori, or the root of an Indian balsam or cough root called Letotannia malfida, in addition to which was thought to be particularly good for asthma and tuberculosis. In addition to its traditional medicinal uses, tobacco is also used as a form of currency between Native Americans and colonists from the 1620s on. Religious use of tobacco is still common among many indigenous peoples, particularly in the Americas. Among the Cree and the Ojibwe of Canada and the north-central United States, it is offered to the Creator with prayers and is used in sweat lodges, pipe ceremonies, and is presented as a gift. A gift of tobacco is traditional when asking an Ojibwe elder a question of spiritual nature. The European Age. Of the four plants of the Americas that spread to the rest of the world in the Columbian Exchange, potatoes, maize, tomatoes, and tobacco, the last is the only one used in every country. Greek and Romanian accounts exist of smoking hemp seeds, and a Spanish poem, circa 1276, mentions the energetic effects of lavender smoke. But tobacco is completely unfamiliar to the Europeans before the discovery of the New World. Las Casas vividly described how the first scouts sent by Columbus into the interior of Cuba found men with half-burned wood in their hands and certain herbs to take their smokes, which are some dry herbs put in a certain leaf, also dry, like these boys make on the day of the Passover of the Holy Ghost. And having lighted one part of it, by the other they suck, absorb, and receive the smoke inside with breath, by which become benumbed and almost drunk. And so it is said they do not feel fatigue. These muskets, as we will now call them, they call tobaccos. I knew Spaniards on the island of Hispaniola who were accustomed to taking it and being reprimanded for it by telling them it was a vice. They replied they were unable to cease using it. I do not know what relish or benefit they found in it. Following the arrival of the Europeans, tobacco became one of the primary products fueling colonialization and also became a driving factor in the incorporation of African slave labor. The Spanish introduced tobacco to Europeans in about 1528, and by 1533, Diego Columbus mentioned a tobacco merchant in Lisbon in his will, showing how quickly the traffic had sprung up. The French, Spanish, and Portuguese initially referred to the plant as the sacred herb because of its valuable medicinal properties. Jean Nicot, French ambassador in Lisbon, sent samples to Paris in 1559. Nicot sent leaves and seeds to Francis II and his mother Catherine of Medici, with instructions to use tobacco as snuff. The king's recurring headaches, perhaps sinus trouble, were reportedly marvelously cured by snuff. Francis II nevertheless died at age 17 years old on December 5, 1560, after a reign of less than 2 years. French cultivation of herbe de la reine, the queen's herb, began in 1560. By 1570, botanists referred to tobacco as Nicotiana although André Savit claimed that he, not Nacat, had introduced tobacco to France. Historians believe this is unlikely, but Savit is the first Frenchman to write about it. Swiss doctor Conrad Gessner in 1563 reported that chewing or smoking tobacco leaf has a wonderful power of producing a kind of peaceful drunkenness. In 1571, Spanish doctor Nicolas Monardes wrote a book about the history of medicinal plants in the New World. In this, he claimed that tobacco could cure 36 health problems, and reported that the plant was first brought to Spain for its flowers, but now we know its greater extent for the sake of the virtues than its beauty. John Hawkins first brought tobacco seeds to England. William Harrison's English chronology mentions tobacco smoking in a country as early as 1573, before Sir Walter Raleigh brought his first Virginia tobacco to Europe from Roanoke colony, referring to it as toba, as early as 1578. In 1595, Anthony Shute published Tobacco, which repeated earlier arguments about the benefits of the plant and emphasized the health-giving properties of pipe smoking. A popular song of the early 1600s by Tobias Hume proclaimed that tobacco is like love. The importation of tobacco into England was not without resistance and controversy. Stuart King James I wrote a famous polemic titled A Contrablast to Tobacco in 1604, in which the king denounced tobacco use as accustomed to loathsome the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, dangerous to the lungs, and the black stinking fume thereof, nearest resembling the horrible Stygian smoke of the pit that is bottomless. That year, an English statute was enacted that placed a heavy protective tariff on tobacco plants. The duty rose from 2d per pound to 10d per pound, a 40-fold increase, but the English demand remained strong despite the high price. Barnaby Rich reported that 7,000 stores in London sold tobacco and calculated that at least 319,375 pounds sterling were spent on tobacco annually. Because the Virginia and Bermuda colonies' economies were affected by the high duty, James in 1624 instead created a royal monopoly. No tobacco could be imported except from Virginia, and a royal license that cost £15 per year was required to sell it. To help the colonies, Charles II banned tobacco cultivation in England but allowed herb gardens for medicinal purposes. Tobacco was introduced elsewhere in continental Europe more easily. Liberia exported ropes of dry leaves in baskets to the Netherlands and southern Germany, and for a while tobacco was in Spanish called canister after the word for basket canastro, and influenced by German naster. In Italy, Prospero Santa Croce in 1561 and Niccolò Tornabuoni in 1570 introduced it to the gardens after seeing the plant on diplomatic missions. Cardinal Crescencio introduced smoking to the country in about 1610 after learning about England. The Roman Catholic Church did not condemn tobacco as James I did, but Pope Urban VIII threatened excommunication for smoking in church. In Russia, tobacco was banned in 1634 except for foreigners in Moscow. Peter the Great, who in England had learned of smoking and the royal monopoly, became the monarch in 1689, however, revoking all bans. He licensed an English company to import 1.5 million pounds of tobacco per year. The monarchy received 28,000 pounds sterling annually. Thank you for listening to the History of Tobacco Part 1. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe and share. Please join me in History of Tobacco Part 2. Till next time, goodbye.